everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. And today, everywhere happens to be part 3 of our 2022 Year of Expansion series. And so we're looking clean into 2022. We got the angel who walks with the world here. We've got all these beings that help me out. And we are looking into today 2022's climate and industry, okay? And obviously part 1 was all about sociology, politics, needing to get along, needing to understand that we're going to expand into whatever our life has placed before us at this point. So here we're sitting in December, and if you're finding in December that you want to kind of whip together a new business or start something new based upon everything you've learned up to this point in life, then 2022 is going to expand on that. If you want to stay stuck in old stories and old programming, 2022 is going to be about staying stuck. It's going to expand on that. So then we moved on to money. Right? And what's going to happen with our money, with our crypto, with our stocks, what's going on, the feminine time frame aspect of money, as opposed to the masculine time frame. What does that mean, right? So today, and excuse me, I'm still getting over some of this grossness that I've had forever, these colds and COVIDs and all the things. So pardon my voice today. However, we're going to launch into our climate and industry. And why did the angelic realm break climate and industry into 2 separate pieces? Well, they did it for a reason. Because obviously, whatever's going on the earth, whatever's going on in our climate, and with the warming of the planet and with the melting of the caps on both the North and South poles, whatever's going on there is going to affect industry and how we feel that industry is the most easily accessed and also supported financially. So, you guys, I talk about this a lot. I don't think it takes a psychic to tell us that 2022's climate issues are going to be what we expect, right? I mean, God bless you, unless you've been living under a shingle somewhere or a rock or a patch of moss, which would be quite blissful if you ask me, you're going to note that there's a lot going on with our weather. And what's weird about the weather issues, gang, I mean, up here in Montana, this is a state that touches Canada, right? So if we're talking from the perspective of winter, it's December of 2021. And if we're talking from the perception of what do we do because the climate's changing in a state that touches Canada and is 70 degrees, I kid you not, 70 degrees in December. 70. I'm sure it's probably been hot before. You always have these people out there who are like, well, back in 1936, in December, it was 114 degrees. And then it plummeted down to negative 406. Everybody's corneas froze. Every time we blinked, we went blind. So yes, I know. The earth goes through all kinds of, cycles, people. However, what I'm noting up here now, okay, in our modern times, 70 degrees is a bit much. And then about a week later, it was down to 32 and snowing. So we're still not in our cold sector of where we normally are in December. Up here in Montana, it's about 45 degrees, 44 degrees, 30 degrees. That may sound cold, okay, for all of my dear pals that are in the Southwest. That might sound freezing. It's actually not for this time of year. Normally, we should be down in the negatives right now. But we're not because our climate is shifting. So I'm sure no matter where you're living, you're going to be noting these climate shifts. You kind of can't get around it. One of the things I'd like to bring our attention to today, especially as this angel who walks with the world is chatting with me, is the fact that our climate in 2022 is really going to start taking on characteristics like really severely like a sci-fi movie. And gang, I know I've been talking about this for a long time and how it's sci-fi every year, and you probably get really tired of me using that same analogy. However, we're really on that time frame from now until about 2025. This is the year of bizarre, really late winter for the Rocky Mountains. And so if you are in Montana, Wyoming, if you're in Colorado, if you're in North or South Dakota, then we're going to have a really weird winter this year. And the Farmer's Almanac was calling and is calling for one of the worst winters in a long time. Well, this could happen. However, I'm not seeing it until the push into 2022. I think we've got a teeny bit of snow on the ground here in Montana. I hope we have more snow for Christmas. That's kind of my kink. So I'm hoping that's the case. But when we look at the weather patterns, our winters are being pushed out further and further. So our winters, as I look into 2022, I mean, we're right there, you guys. I mean, literally, it's the top of December. We're looking into 2022. But most of our winter is going to be starting, I don't know, mid-January. Then it goes February, March into April. Oh, God. Oh, God. I need vitamin D just looking at this angel telling me this. So basically, if you're in a northern state in the Rocky Mountain region, our winter is going to roll into March, April. Like the cold, snowy winter. It gets started later and later. If we're looking in the Midwest, if you follow the podcasts that I put out, especially back in 2018, 2019, talking about how the Midwest was going to flood in 2020, well, okay, it did. And then 2021, we had a lot of flooding. So the poor Midwest and the American South are going to get just hammered in rain, but way worse than this last year. So if you are someone who lives there, make sure you can pick up a sub pump. Make sure you're somebody who can pick up a little raft if you need to float things in a weird flood. There's just going to be so much water, gang. So much water. It's going to be super dry on the entire West Coast. Washington State will probably get out of some of the dry, but it's still going to be drier for Washington State and Northern Oregon. Yet our weather is going to take what we had this last year and then ramp it up and cube it, okay? So we're going to have super dry as I look ahead. Our summer in 2022 is going to be fires. So make sure that we are being very careful about those of us who like to camp. And I can't say it enough, please be careful with the great outdoors. This last year, 2021, my wife and daughter and we were unable to go to our land. We have 20 acres out on back of the Beartooths, which may sound like a ton. 20 acres may sound like a lot of land for those that are in states where land is harder to come by. It's not actually that much. You'd be surprised. But we're on the back of the Beartooths, and there was a guy who rode a dirt bike up a trail, crashed the dirt bike. The dirt bike caught fire, and he was barefoot, riding a dirt bike, drunk. So he didn't put out the fire. He ran away barefoot from the fire, which literally started about 100 yards from the Wyoming border. I mean, it was so far south in Montana. And that stinking fire burned, God, what was it by the time it was done? 60,000 acres almost of land. And it burned it in a really weird area. It burned it where burns don't normally happen. So our land in 2021, the whole entire 20 acres was just burned to the ground. I mean, it was burned to the dust. It was burned to the dirt. It looked like a post-apocalyptic movie set. And when my wife and I finally got out there, because you need to go out and take a look at it, right? When we got out there, the entire Beartooth Valley was just burned down to nothing. And there were dust devils all over the place because it was just black. It was horrifying, except for this one tree. I swear to God, this fire went around the one tree in the prairie area because we live right against the bottom of the mountains. We don't live there, but we have this land that's I wish we lived there. That's right against the bottom of the mountains. And there was this big cottonwood tree, you guys. It was humongous. This cottonwood tree grew in a creek bed, and it's massive. I don't know if you're familiar with cottonwoods, but they're huge trees. Like, think of a giant oak tree, okay? So here's this massive cottonwood in a creek bed, and this fire went around the tree. It spared the tree. I have no idea why, but it ate everything else. It ate cabins, it ate homes. It spared this tree. And you could see where the fire went right around the tree. It was pretty magnificent. Anyway, I digress. So we're going to have a lot more fires. Things are going to be a lot hotter. Please be careful if you decide to go camping and you're anywhere in the United States, obviously. But especially if you're in the western part of the United States, please be mindful. One little stray spark off your roasting marshmallow campfire thing could really be a bad deal. And having 20 acres burned down to the quick, I can tell you that it's a real thing. And our climate, it's so dry that even in the Beartooth Mountains and in this back area behind the Beartooths, which can be kind of dry, honestly. But it went up so fast, gang, I couldn't believe it. And it ate the mountain, and it crawled right over the mountain, and it almost took out my favorite city, Red Lodge. It was coming right down the mountain. Red Lodge residents were standing out there watching Mount Maurice, which goes right down into Red Lodge, and they're just watching it just on fire, just barreling towards them like, well, we had a good run. This is it. But they managed to extinguish the fire. So this kind of heat that we saw last year in 2021 is going to be majorly exemplified in 2022. Now, you can choose to take this information and get all whacked out about it, or you can recognize that if you live in the western part of the United States, especially Nevada, Arizona, especially if you're California, oh my God, with the Sierra Nevadas, southern Oregon, okay, and interior Oregon, interior Washington, you can be aware that having just a few little water stores would probably be a good idea. Now, I've noted that in a lot of spaces, especially metropolitan spaces, big city spaces, in the United States, they discourage the collection of rainwater into water barrels. This is an actual thing. It's because if you get the rainwater into a water barrel, then that standing water can be a breeding ground for bugs, mosquitoes, pests, right? However, if you bury the rain bottle or the rain barrel or bucket or whatever, however big you want this, space to be, and you let your downspouts catch this underground and you have an overflow of some kind, what I'm noting is that a lot more city ordinances in the United States don't really get itchy about storing rainwater below ground. It's an above ground issue where bugs can get into it. So I'm just telling you guys this not to make everybody wigged out, yet we're talking about climate, right? So then we get into the northern states, and for all of my friends around the Great Lakes, you guys are going to be swimming in water up there, man. There is going to be so much rain. We have a lot more ice cap melt in 2022. So anything that would feed the Great Lakes, any ocean water, any river systems, whatever, the Great Lakes are going to get higher and higher. So just be aware of that, be aware of it. Our farmlands, our Kansas, our Nebraska, our Indiana, there's going to be, mostly I see for that area, this angel that walks with the world shows me that area is going to be wicked hardcore in not only tornadoes, yet just whacked out low-ranging lightning storms. So that's something I want to talk about really quickly, is that the angel that walks with the world is showing me that as our climate heats up, it changes not only the tidal flow, okay? It changes the conveyor belts in the ocean as the ocean warms up and all of the fresh water melts and the fresh water, sinks and it gets all weird. Actually, no, it floats, I guess. The salt water sinks or something. But basically, there's an issue with the fresh water there. As it goes into the ocean system, it affects the conveyor belts for our tidal currents. Up above the atmosphere, in the ionosphere, when we have severe heat that's kicked off of the earth, that changes the upper air currents as well. So this changes the nature of the types of storms electromagnetically, apparently, that come over the earth. Now, 2022 is not going to be some like, oh my God, we've gone from everything that we've had into some kind of horror show. I mean, it's kind of more of what we've got. Okay. However, I'm telling everybody this though, because we're going to have too much rain and awkward times. We're going to have rainouts of crops that are trying to grow in the Midwest. That's corn. And I don't know if you guys recognize this. And if you folks, I need to stop saying you guys. It used to be a non-gendered term. Now it's a heavily gendered term. It was just kind of a rock and roll surfer term. So to everyone out there listening, we'll try that. The rains that are coming in the Midwest are far more intense, and they do come at awkward times when corn crops are starting to come up. So we've got oversaturation, too much water, a lot of root rot. We've got a lot of stalk rot, stalks meaning the stalk of the corn in the Midwest. And if you look at how much of our country is driven off the corn industry, now, raise your hand if you live in an ag state like Montana. Well, I do. So even though I'm not a farmer, I'm very in touch with the agricultural cycles because my entire state is driven by agricultural cycles and outdoor tourism, okay? So when we look at corn, gang, it's important to note that the corn industry, not only does it feed our cows, it feeds our people. It makes corn syrup, which we should not be eating because that's basically like eating a demonic melted shower curtain, but it's in everything. So when I'm a maker of a Nabisco cookie or whatever that has corn syrup in it and the corn crops go south, so I can't really buy my vat of corn syrup like I used to because the corn is not growing. And thank God for corn syrup, it can last on the shelf for approximately 200 million atomic years. So we don't need to worry about that. But what I tell you is that when we're looking at the price of corn that's going to go up, that affects everything. Because if I'm somebody who makes, I don't know, Bob's barbecue sauce, and in Bob's barbecue sauce, I have corn syrup. I got corn syrup. If that's the case, and all of a sudden my corn syrup prices go way up, well, then my barbecue sauce prices go way up. So a lot of our junk food in America, sodas, all kinds of stuff, they're driven by corn syrup. So what we have is a spike in food costs in the fast food sector. This is 2022, okay? So obviously we've got inflation coming because we covered that already in the 2022 episode about money, episode 2, part 2. And what we're looking at now is that our food costs are going to be kind of stupid because of weather attributes that make harvesting the food difficult. Another thing that's going to be a real pain in the butt to get, I'm changing tracks here because the angel who walks with the world is changing my map up. And excuse me, everybody, sorry about my voice. I hope I don't lose it before the end of the podcast. That's the way this little post-COVID dance has been going here. So we're just going to ride this horse till there's no more hoofs on it, is what we're going to do. So when I get a chance to look at Napa Valley in California, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, all of that wine, okay? So not only grapes like a lot of hot weather, They like it hot, 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 which is great. Yet what I'm seeing in that part of the country is it's going to be hot, 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 and then awkward amounts of rain. And then hot, 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 and then awkward amounts of rain. So we have weird weather patterns that interrupt themselves that then in turn do not give our plant life time to get the growth legs that it needs to become what we expect it to be. Now, I'm not saying that Napa Valley's got to bottom out. I'm just saying you might want to think about going into 2022 if you're a wine drinker. I'm not saying don't support your favorite wineries, okay? Maybe go to your favorite wineries towards the very front part of the year and maybe buy cases of their wine to put away. Because although wineries make wine into the future, today's grape crop, right, that's going to inform wine prices later if that grape crop thing fails. So we're going to have erratic growing cycles. And one of the more stable areas for growing in the United States is going to be way inland California, in about the central part of the state, I'm seeing, and the Rocky Mountain region. Now, what the hell do we grow in Montana besides, I don't know, guns, rednecks? What do we grow in Montana? And I say that in jest, so everybody do not get your panties in a twist here. Actually, we grow a lot of animals, a lot of cattle out here because we have land to grow the cattle. But we do a lot of wheat. And we do grow some corn in Montana and alfalfa, yet a primary crop here is wheat. Wheat. And it's because we can plant wheat that it's called dryland farming. And for those who are not from an ag state like I am, dryland farming is when you plant a crop that you don't need to irrigate. Like pretty much you plant a grass, like a type of wheat, that can grow in low water densities and kind of works with nature. Now, you would think, well, if that's the case and you can plant wheat that doesn't need to be irrigated, why isn't everybody planting, dryland wheat? Well, the reason is you need a crap ton of acreage to plant your dryland wheat because it doesn't yield as fruitfully as the wheat that's obviously always getting watered, okay? So if you're going to do dryland farming, you got to have like 100,000 acres or, you got to have a lot of acres because per acre, your wheat yield is not going to be as fruitful as some of the irrigated crops. Now, once in a while, Mother Nature really smiles on you and dumps a bunch of rain, and you have what's called a bumper crop. And a lot of our farmers out in Montana have federally subsidized deals that sell a huge amount of their grain to places like China and Russia and overseas. And the American government uses the grain that we grow here in Montana, not all of it, but a lot of it. They pre-buy it from the farmers and they use it as in the trade margins, and they use it to leverage global trade prices. So when you talk about agricultural states and ag prices, we're not just talking about a few little farmers sitting around picking their teeth with a corn stalk. Ag prices set trade for a lot of the rest of the world, especially in the United States, because you got to remember, gang, we have something here in the U.S. that a lot of other countries don't have. We got land. We got land for days. And we can plant and grow and still have big population bases, but still grow all this food. So the United States ends up growing a ton of food that is then just shipped off to the rest of the world. As a matter of fact, we ship off some of our best beef that we have to China. We ship a lot out. And obviously, we use a lot of those crops here. Smaller wheat farms stay local, sell to local growers. They sell to local bread farms. I got a bread farm. I took this bread seed and I planted it over here. We have split rye, a crop of split rye. Oh, my God. So, obviously, these local farmers will pass off their crops to all kinds of bakers and wonderful vendors here in Montana. However, when we're talking about growing cycles and we're talking about the planet, our dryland farmers out in Montana are going to hang in there by a half a strap on their overalls because they're going to get just barely enough rain to draw it in. However, we have to watch insects in 2022. We're going to have a lot of gross bugs, you guys. Like it's going to be the pestilence, garbage from the Old Testament. So we got to watch our grasshoppers, which came through Montana in 2021, and those dryland farmers were already struggling to have a crop out there, and waves of locusts came through and not only ate the wheat down to the grass, they ate it down to the dirt, but they ate the wheat stalks into the dirt and into the root structure. That's how many of these bugs there are. So one of the more stable growing areas, just climate-wise, is going to be the dryland farming in the north, east of the mountains in the Rocky Mountain regions, in Colorado, in Wyoming, and in Montana. And when we get back out to the Dakotas, we're going to start to get into some of that weird Midwestern weather over there, but the Dakotas are kind of on a line of creepy super tornadoes and a lot of weird bugs and drought. So the Dakotas are going to be, if you drew a diagonal line, which is an odd line to have, from the upper top portion of North Dakota and make a diagonal all the way down to the bottom western corner of South Dakota. So the northeasternmost corner of North Dakota, make it like a line that goes down to the southwestern point of South Dakota. That's kind of the weird line that we're going to have, where the super tornadoes and weird, either too dry or too wet, and there's dry and buggy, or there's wet and weird and lots of lightning. So that's kind of where the cutoff is there, as this angel is showing me the map. Then we're into the Midwest. We're into the northern, we already talked about the Great Lakes states, and way too much water. Oh my gosh. And then down in the Midwest where there's flooding and stagnance and weirdness. Then we get over to the South. Oh my, our American South. So there are going to be some more stabilized areas in the South. North Carolina, the northern part of Alabama, that kind of bandwidth right in there, Virginia, right in there. We're going to have fairly stable, a stable climate pocket there. Everything, Texas, Louisiana, all my sweet friends in Florida, everybody that's on the Gulf Coast, the Gulf this year is going to have the weirdest weather. It's going to be weird. Like there's going to be these strange storms that just whip. Usually the storms come in from the Atlantic. If we're talking hurricane season, they come in from the Atlantic and they spin up the East Coast, or they spin into the Gulf of Mexico, and they land in Louisiana, or they land in Florida on, the western side. Something weird. There's going to be a lot of extreme storms that form over the Gulf. Now, they're not it's not like a hurricane coming in off the Atlantic. These are just weird, crazy tropical storms. And those suckers are just going to move northeast, but on a slow crawl, but they're huge. So they might be hitting they'll be hitting part of Louisiana and part of Florida, and they're hitting part of Texas, and the whole thing is just dragging up north. It's a massive cloud bank of heat. And then once it hits stateside, it turns into thunderstorms. So it's kind of an unusual deal. And I was asking this angel, and I hope I'm doing okay with this, you guys. I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm trying to follow all this. I was asking this angel, I'm like, what's the deal with these giant weirdo storms that just form over the Gulf? It's like they form there. You think of storms forming over areas where the tidal currents create more of a cold and hot flow out into the ocean, right? Like the Atlantic or the Pacific. And really, the Gulf of Mexico it's basically a graveyard for a lot of sunken ships. There's a lot of gold at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. There's a lot. There's so much more than people even know. If you are a scuba diver and you're hearing me talk about this, the Gulf is kind of shallow for the most part. I mean, compared to, the Mariana Trench out in the Atlantic. And there are huge shipwrecks at the bottom of the Gulf. Huge. There are shipwrecks we don't even know about. There were pirate wrecks coming up from Barbados and coming up from Belize and coming up from Jamaica and trying to skirt the bottom to go into meet ships that were coming out of the port of New Orleans to do trade out on the water. I mean, there are huge amounts of sunken treasure. And the bottom of the Gulf is really super soft. So it kind of like absorbs, it kind of sinks in and eats everything. So what these angels are showing me is it has something to do, this climate shift with these weirdo storms forming in the Gulf, has something to do with the heat off the bottom of the ocean and reflected off the top of the ocean. And I don't really understand the physics of that, but it creates these massive storms that then kind of travel upwards. Now, why am I telling you all this? Why are we getting into this? Why did I spend half an hour on weird weather? And I haven't even gotten to the East Coast. The reason is, gang, is I want you to be aware that we're going to have more severe weather so you can make wise choices going forward. Not fear-based choices, not hysterical, I got to build a bunker in my backyard and now I got my top ramen and a gun and all my reruns of Golden Girls on a tube TV. I got this. VHS and a hamster that's running in a wheel and creating electricity here in my hole in the ground. Please don't go there. I'm telling you these things so you can prepare. If you are in the Gulf States area, gang, just make sure you got, storm stuff, right? Like have candles and food and floaty things. I get a lot of water influxes. So even if you have like a 2-man raft, that if you need to blow up real quick or whatever, stick your kids or your valuables in and just have it. Even if the water raises, 2 or 3 feet, it's not probably going to kill you at that height, but maybe you don't want your stuff, like you might have stuff you don't want completely ruined. I'm just saying we just need to be a little smart right now because the way that it's going to roll up the East Coast, which is going to get, of course, it's going to get more weirdo, stronger hurricanes. The central belt of the East Coast is going to get some really severe nor'easterners in 2022. Ice storms, where you have ice coming out of the sky, like in chunks. I'm not kidding you guys. You should look at this. I sound like I'm lying. I sound like some histrionic asshat over here going, there's going to be ice that falls from the sky in New York. But there is. To the point where it turns to hail or shards and breaks glass and all the things. So just be aware that our weather is going to kick it up a notch. One of the most stable states that you can possibly live in, like overall for climate in the United States, one of the most stable. One is going to be Ohio. There you go. You're welcome, Ohio. Just because of where it is. Geographically located. It's not quite in the flood zone. It's not quite in the freeze zone. It's not quite in the ice zone. It's kind of its own little thing. One is going to be Maine. So if you live in Maine, you're rocking it. Maine is just high enough outside of this weird, funky cold belt thing. What's going to happen is the polar vortex gets pushed south in 2022. A crap ton. It gets pushed way south. So when that happens and it scoops through the Northwest and the Rocky Mountain Belt and it goes through the Midwest and it hits our American South, which again, we're going to have a lot of water. My folks in Mississippi and Arkansas and Alabama, so much water down there, gang. Oh my God. So by the time that we get up to Maine is sort of like, I don't know. I think Maine picks up good Canada vibes, to be just straight up with you. I think Maine is so far north in the United States that it's like, yeah, we just don't want to deal with all this that you guys are dealing with. We're in Maine. We actually care about the environment. In Maine, we're conscientious. In Maine, we care about our fellow man. In Maine, we're happy to receive a pair of knit mittens and give a pair of knit mittens for Christmas. We're Maine, man. We love you, man. And I honest to God think that the mojo of Maine is one of the reasons that it just kind of stays Maine. I mean, it's going to be a little more cold up there. There's going to be a little more rain, but Maine stays pretty solid. And it also has to do with the fact that it's just a little bit north, actually, of where that depressed polar vortex ends up pushing this craziness through the middle part of the country. And Maine's just up there going, well, we're Maine. Would you like some apple cider? Would you like some apple cider? Sometimes Dad is better. Did you guys ever see Pet Sematary? Oh, God, what a scary movie. Anyway, that is better. So if you're in Maine, the one thing I would tell my Maine friends is that the Atlantic is going to have some attitude problems in 2022. I mean, mega attitude problems. So just be prepared for some weirdly large tidal raises, weirdly large surf at certain times of the year. And again, this has to do with some tidal issues. Not like tide with the moon, you guys. They're showing me, the conveyor belt in the ocean, right? That goes from the north and all that cold water sinks down and it goes down to the south and gets returned back up. That conveyor belt gets a little wonked out. It starts to get kind of wonked out in 2022. So it does create some odd, I would say, just waves. So just be aware if you're a fisherman or you're this or you're that. Also, if you are a shellfish fisherman out in Maine, you've probably been noticing a slightly, according to this angel who walks with the world, I'm not a lobster fisherman, but this angel's talking, so I'm repeating this. If you are somebody out there who fishes shellfish, you've probably been noticing apparently a migration of these animals. They are responding to this push on tidal currents, and there is a feeling of them going north. So for whatever that means to you as a shellfish person, the little crabs and lobsters, there's a feeling of them going north, and it has something to do with staying in the colder water. So there you go. So, this has been 37 minutes of weather description. However, I wanted to get this out there because whether you're in Tornado Alley, whether you're rained out, whether you're getting flooded out, whether you're on fire, whether you're in the Rocky Mountain Beltway, which is going to get super hot in the summer, really cold later in the winter. Yet in the Rocky Mountain Belt, we're going to have some dryness, yet it's going to not be as epic as dryness other places. We're going to get rain, but it's not going to be as epic other places. And in fairness, I have been shouting out since about 2017, if you want the most climate stable area, then the Rocky Mountain Belt is one of them. Or really, if you want the most stable state in the union, it's going to be Maine for climate. So sorry, Maine, you're probably going to have everybody moving there now. So that's what I'm looking at. And the reason that I get into this is because that affects food. It affects industry, because let's look at our car industry, okay? My attention is being directed by the angel who walks with the world to what we make in these different areas of the country. And we've already talked about dryland farming and how much acreage you need and issues you can have with that. We've talked about corn crops. The interior of California, that's going to hang in there for steady heat. The problem that the interior of California is going to have in 2022 is getting enough water to water the freaking lettuce, or whatever. I don't know that they're growing lettuce down there, but whatever you're growing, the amount of water needed is going to be the issue. So we're going to start to see the tease in the middle of 2022 to what becomes 2024's water wars if we can't get our crap together as the United States and start to work together and figure out how to reclaim all these pools of water drowning our corn in the Midwest, cleaning it up and getting it out to our coasts where we're actually, in our plains areas where we're actually non-flooded and growing vegetables for the rest of the country and the world. So we're going to have to start to work together as a United States. That was 39 minutes of setup for the rest of this point. Okay, so we're going to have to work together in the freaking United States. We're not going to be the blue state and the red state. We're going to be the United States, and the red state of Montana is going to need some of the blue state of Washington's water, or the blue state of Illinois' water, or whatever. So we're going to have to get away from this weird 1940s style polarized political garbage that just does not work, by the way, and move past that, because as a united states, we're going to need to help each other, which is why I started this series of podcasts on consciousness. Because what we're going to end up having is a bunch of people who, on principle, are like, maybe they're a red state and maybe they don't want their water or resources going to a blue state. And now it's a big meltdown, and now we're having protests. And please don't be that person. Please don't. You know, our time on this earth is so short. Do you have any idea how short our time is? It's stinking short. I mean, if you are lucky, you make it a century. And if you're extra lucky, you make it a century with a good quality of life. Yet what we don't want is to leave a world for the people in our world who are not quite a century old and are just being born and are just coming up. We don't want to leave them with a fighting, contentious mess that turns into the freaking Hunger Games, where some states have growability and some don't. If you're in Maine, you have trees and you eat. And if you are in Nebraska, you're flooded and full of mosquitoes and famine. I mean, uncool, man. Okay? So we've got to be able to work together here. And our industry is going to reflect our climate change. It's going to reflect our climate change. And again, Maine's going to be Ohio, Montana is one of the more stable states, although we're going to struggle with fires out here. God, we're going to have fires like we did last year. Ugh, Lord. So really, I mean, another stable state is going to be New Mexico. New Mexico is going to be pretty damn stable. Water in New Mexico is going to start to be an issue, but because of our jet stream issues and changes, there are going to be more water opportunities that are going to come to New Mexico, Arizona, even though the heat tends to just bake that right off the surface of those states. So, I mean, again, this podcast isn't here to freak you out, but my job is to report, gang, right? So if you know that things are going to be slightly more challenging, we can prepare for that. We can get our headspace on that. We're all not totally shocked when it's worse than we thought it'd be. Duh. Hello. Climate change. So when this happens, our industry, let's look at our car industry. Draw me back to that. American steel in 2022 to 25 is going to increase in value dramatically. And one of the reasons for this is I look ahead in 2022, towards the end of 2022, there's going to be some wobbling with China in our global market. And we buy a lot of cheap Chinese steel right now. I say cheap because it is cheap, and I mean cheap in a non-positive way. Like the steel is brittle, it breaks. It's not the greatest quality in ore. And you can buy it a lot cheaper in China because it's not as good. As a matter of fact, it was a big scandal, now that I'm thinking about that, God. When Donald Trump ran for president in 2016, 2017, his Trump Towers were built with a ton of that Chinese steel. And that was a big scandal because he was running on American industry, and he has these skyscrapers, which from a business perspective, okay, when he built them in the 80s, he probably wasn't thinking, well, I'm going to be running for president someday. Actually, he probably was, but he probably wasn't being smart enough to recognize that if he uses Chinese steel in all of his skyscrapers, that's going to bite him in the butt in his later election. But the problem with the Chinese steel, too, is it's got failure rates. You know, it's not as rated. It's weaker steel. So when I look into 2022, American steel is taking a big leap forward. And as I look into that into the future, one of the reasons for that American steel taking a big leap forward back into the global market is because the steel plants can take the cost of production down by using green energy technologies, apparently, that I guess there's a lot of heat and all kinds of things that it takes to make steel. I've never made steel, so I'm just following this angel here. However, there are going to be a lot more wind farms, a lot of solar driven, a lot of big battery driven components, which allow the steel to come down in price a little and be more competitive. Because also in 2022, we're going to have 2022 to 2024, we're going to have massive, massive, massive incentives for green energy companies. And if you look right now at, if you look at our global economy and you look at the United States economy and you look at the Biden administration is trying to divert as much money to infrastructure as possible right now. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like Joe Biden, and they're like, well, of course, he's trying to butter up the liberals and, hand them money and all these things. Well, really, gang, I'm not saying he's not, but if you look at our railroads, that's a technology that has not advanced since the frickin' 1800s in America. There are some railroad trestles out here by Butte, Montana. There's no frickin' way in heck I would get on a train and ride that thing. Now, I'm not saying that our trains aren't safe, but in my mind, they're not. Because I see those trestles and I think to myself, are you crapping me with putting a several ton giant 2-mile long thing over the top of that? That is just going to, that is a bad sci-fi movie right there. But there's going to be no Spider-Man to save us, okay? So why am I bringing up infrastructure? Because what we're going to be seeing in the next several years from the federal government, who, by the way, knows all the stuff I'm telling you right now, okay? It's not because they've had a psychic working with them, which, well, maybe they do. Actually, let me look. Yeah, they do. They have people who do what I do that works with them. Okay, well, that's good. In addition to that, they also have scientists. Those people who actually study this crap and know what they're talking about. They also have agricultural specialists. The people who know about ag. Yeah, those guys. And so they've been telling the government for a long time what I'm telling you. And this is what I'm looking at here. So our government has been preparing for a lot of failure in traditional industries. If we have money and infrastructure, we can absorb some people coming out of other ag-related jobs that are going to get sidelined because of climate issues in 2022. And at the very least, we can say, hey, well, at least we can hire you for now to come fix this railroad trestle that looks like a big trick out of a special effects terror movie from 1866. So could you go fix that? Thank you. So there's kind of a method to the madness when you look at it on a federal level. And so why does it affect cars? Okay, so Detroit. Here's the cool thing. All my friends in Detroit is going to get a big freaking nod from not only the government, but the universe. Michigan, all right? It's a Great Lakes state. And Detroit is going to have, because of the price of steel coming down, and I don't quite understand all of this, but there's going to be a giant breath into our automotive industry, into our steel industry, and into our manufacturing industry. Part of this has to do with federal subsidies. The other part of it has to do with green energy that offsets costs of making things and the steel issue. And there's going to be federal incentives for some of these, like Detroit, our auto capital. There's going to be, like Ford Motor Company is going to be bringing more of its business home to the United States. There's going to be tax incentives for that. Again, Detroit, home of the automotive. There's going to be more tax incentives to be stateside and to use green energy applications. So if you're a stock buyer, you might want to look into, what is it? I don't even know what they make in Detroit. Is that Chrysler out there? God. Or a lot of the Fords are made in Mexico or this or that, but we're going to be bringing a lot of that manufacturing home, in part because we're going to be switching to a lot of electrical power as opposed to gas or coal power in these plants out of battery power. And those big battery powers that powers these whole plants, they're using components that are mined out of the United States as opposed to buying the cheaper alloys from Central America. So there's a whole different industry setup that starts in 2022. And it rolls on to 2025. And whereas other industries I see are going to struggle, our fishing industry is going to struggle because our tides and our conveyor belts are switching up, which changes our, not only the salinity to a degree of the ocean with all the fresh water coming into it, but it also changes the heat, the temperature of our ocean. So look for things like our regular tuna fish that's usually like $1.29 for a can or whatever on the shelf. We're going to have increased costs in fish products. And we're going to, especially off the coast of our Asian countries, where those folks, fish is to the Asian countries like beef is to America, right? Everybody has their kink. So we're going to be looking at those fish populations also due to the way that we've been not handling our oceans as stewards of pollution. We're going to be finding more mercury levels and just less healthy populations of tuna and stuff like that. So if you were a fish person, then again, I'm not telling you to go dig a hole in the backyard and bury your bunker. Yet, fresh fish is my fave. God, I love going to the Pacific Northwest and having fresh caught salmon, line caught salmon, and fresh mussels that you pull yourself off of a buoy someplace that they'd say, go sure, harvest the mussels. I love that. If you're someone who lives in a landlocked state like Montana, you might consider getting some really nice fillets of salmon right now and just making sure that you wrap them in tin foil so they don't freeze or burn, and wrap them in some plastic, and you might freeze those guys for a rainy day. And don't leave them there too long. You'll freeze dry the salmon. But we're going to have a few difficulties in some of our fish population until our oceans can acclimate to the heat shift that we're having. And that's nothing entirely new, but I do see it exacerbate itself. And we kind of hear about it more in the news. Come around the summertime of 2022. More so this affects, again, it affects our Asian neighbors that consume more of that fish out of the ocean than we do here in the United States. But still, if you're a fish eater, just be prepared that the costs of things in industry in 2022 are expected to rise. Okay? For all the reasons we talked about. Now, 52 minutes into this podcast, I am not saying all this to doom and gloom you out. I'm telling you this because this is why we're here, gang. We're here because we can do this. We can share. We can figure out ways to get water piped from one part of the country to a droughted part of another country. We can figure out how to work together. We don't have to decline and decay into this politically divided nation, which now that we're in the feminine, that's not really working out. I'm telling you all of this so you can put your most brilliant thinking caps on and say, okay, well, it's not going to be all doom and gloom, and there's going to be some totally normal days and weeks and months in 2022. It's just when the abnormalities rear their head, loves, it's going to be quite abnormal. So don't wig out. Just be like, oh, God, that's right. She said that on that part 3 podcast, that things were going to be a little weird. If you're a person listening who's of a more conservative bent, and you're panicking about all the federal subsidies for industry that are going to come out in 2022 to 2023, please don't. Guys, we need this kind of infusion into our economy. It's not a handout. We've got to support what we are. We've got to support United States industries. So if the government doesn't prop up some of these areas that are trying to kind of get going again, then the good business people of those areas don't have enough leg up that they can then take over. And they will take over, believe me. So for my conservative listeners, and I do have conservative listeners, by the way, that are listening, don't panic about the government stuff. We need to give people enough of a leg up that they can take over with good business decisions and handle their books. And they will. But when you're in such a deficit on the steel industry, or you're in such a deficit in a place like Detroit where they don't even have clean water, which apparently is going to be addressed in 3/4 of the way through 2022. There's going to be a great big push in this country for clean water, clean air, clean resources, clean power, all the clean things. This is really important. The year of expansion expanding our ideas of who we are. We can't be the red state that won't give water to a blue state or the blue state who won't give water to a red state. We can't be those people. We can't think like a bumper sticker. We can't think in terms of 140 characters or less in 2022. We will all be asked to be problem solvers and negotiators. And we will all be asked to be visionaries. We will be asked to come forward with our highest versions of ourselves in this time frame and come together in not only sociology, trying not to fall apart in politics, in money, crypto, and mortgages, within our climate, and within our industry. And for those of you, again, I want to touch on this briefly in the few minutes that we have left. For those of you that are supporters of industry through stocks, we're going to have a battery switchover. It's been lithium batteries, right? Lithium batteries. What I look and I see in the future, and 2022 is really the springboard for this, but it's really not going to catch on until about 2024. However, lithium batteries tend to blow up and do all these weird things. So we're going to be going to zinc oxide batteries, which right now we already have, but they tend to be a little more expensive. Well, with the further mining of copper, which we are also going to see more copper mines in the United States. So if you have an opportunity to support the mines that mine in the way that is the most ecologically responsible. And that's hard for me to even say, because I'm just a hug a tree and ride a whale kind of lefty over here. Yet, gang, when I look into the future, our go-to clean energy is going to be electricity. And on one hand, it's smart, but on the second hand, we're going to have problems with that later when we have high atmospheric EMF buildup. But let's one crisis at a time, shall we? So when we look at how much it costs to put a battery together, there's so much copper in those and in our wind farms and in our solar power, tons of copper. So if we can manage to, regulate that in the United States and have some sort of oversight that's environmentally tight, as opposed to what's happening in our rainforest right now. And in Brazil, where over 45% of our rainforest has been destroyed by the leader of Brazil, because he's just letting them mow it down so they can graze cattle out there, because Burger King needs burgers and McDonald's needs burgers. And a lot of our fast food is South American beef that's cheaply raised, killed inhumanely, and shipped up here. And I understand, we all got to eat what we can eat. And if you're somebody that the fast food fits into your family budget, guess what? I'm glad you're not starving. Thank you for not starving your family, okay? We're not all privileged enough to have, perfectly organic cows that are grass-fed and grass-finished. And I get so freaking tired of, and again, I'm a lefty, so I tend to be more critical of the left because I'm part of the left, so there you go. But it just makes me so angry when this virtue signaling comes up about, you're eating fast food and you're eating this and that's not organic and that's not this. There's a lot of people in the United States right now, gang, who are working 3 and 4 jobs, and that food is what the family's going to get for dinner, okay? And it's not because those people don't love the planet. It's because that's what they can afford for dinner. So we need to back off the virtue signaling and judginess, and those of us that are privileged enough to be able to choose the type of food and how it's raised, to recognize that that's a freaking privilege in the USA, and to stop acting like everybody else is the devil because they don't have our privilege. That's gross, man. That's what we got to give away in 2022. All the virtue signaling. And again, I tend to be a touch more critical of me fellow lefties because I am one of you. So we just got to watch that. And going into 2022, let's focus on what we can do together. Let's focus on, if you've had an invention that you've always wanted to put out, but you haven't done it, do it in 2022. I don't care if you're so insecure about it, it makes you throw up sending it into the patent office. I don't care if it's drawn on a napkin that you made a photocopy of. Get your ideas out there. You are important. You are valid. We are all being activated for this time frame so we can save each other and help our society make it through this time. Mother Earth is going to keep chugging along whether we're freaking riding on top of her skin or not. I will tell you that. The Earth is eternal. Humanity is not. Not if we're not going to let it be. Not if we're not going to get into sync with this planet. Not if we're going to deny being in sync with one another, gang. We're an option. Straight up. And that's, it's hysterical. When you listen to these angels talk about how many times we've been either wiped out or almost wiped out, and if they had expressions on their faces, it would just be like, my God, you guys are just like, you're like the COVID virus. You just keep recreating yourself to come back. But they don't mean it negatively. But it's true. We are. Humanity is a lot like a virus. We just keep we'll be down to 3 of us that'll find a little pocket or a cave to live in. And we procreate and come out and then start acting like we own the whole place all over again. So hopefully this time we can learn, gang, in 2022, the year of expansion. Let your ideas expand. Be fearless in bringing what you are to this world. Let that expand. Let your ability to connect expand. Let your ideas to transcend a 2-party political system, even though that's going to be there. We can have the 2-party system, yet let your ideas to bridge that system come forward. Be courageous. Be that which is helpful for all, okay? And this was going to be a 4-part series, but I shaved it down to a 3-part series because I didn't want to overburden you guys with like super fine details of industry and business because these angels said it was not necessary. We tied it with climate. However, just understand that as we go forward, we are going to have the opportunity to create a whole new climate. And it means that it's not been done before, and it needs people who are brave enough to believe in one another, to come forward and say, you know what? Can we just take a chance on our better nature for 5 seconds? Can I just trust your better nature for 5 minutes at a time? And let's try to do something magnificent. And if something goes sideways, I'm going to try not to just assume that you're the evil empire and get all of my bumper stickers out and wag my placards in your face. I mean, can we just try to bring our genius together? Because 2022 is the year of humility. It is the year of service. It is the year of expansion. It is the year of great innovation. And it can be the year of great oppression if we're stuck in our own story that says we're oppressed. So let's work for those who truly are oppressed. Let's work to get us all into a place where we can be heard and seen and valued. 2022 is a major turning point, gang. And I'm pretty excited about it. So I hope you are too. I hope this 3-part series did not overwhelm you. I hope it inspired you. We are here to co-create. We are here to be literally mavericks of our time. We are here to invent. We are here to rise above the old ugly and create the new fabulous. We are here to create something that is so powerful that it's going to knock us into next week with what we're capable of. If you've been sitting at home itchy, feeling like you need a career change, but you don't know what it is, but secretly you know you have some superpowers that you're hiding that demand you step into leadership in a certain area, well, for God's sakes, get up off your prayer bones and get out there and lead in the areas that you are led to lead. Your heart matters. Your intuition matters in 2022. It always has. But gang, I can't tell you this enough. 18 years worth of my work has culminated into this time frame between 2022 and 2025. Maybe I'll get a retire to Belize afterwards. I don't know. I doubt it. Dreaming about rum on the beach right now. And I'd share it with all you. So let us share the most visionary, building, creative time that the United States has ever experienced. Because in this new time, all people have a chance to sit at the table. That's what the angel who walks with the world is showing me. That's what I'm looking at. And that's what I have faith in you to help me and all of us bring to fruition. Thanks for listening. to the 2022 Year of Expansion series, gang. Let's just absolutely create something mind-blowing in 2022. And I will see you next podcast.